to get all cleaned up and put away.
All right, welcome everybody. Hello, happy Friday. My name is Caleb and I'm an advocate here with Galt Advocacy, and we do this every single week. So if you're new here, welcome. We go live and we talk about all things special needs. And so in the world of disabilities, we talk about regional center, IHSS, updates in Medi-Cal, all that jazz, IEP support, things like that. So welcome if you're new. If you're not new, welcome back. Glad you're here. Glad you get to enjoy this Friday afternoon with me. Thank you for taking the time. Take a moment if you can to like the stream and share it with somebody or tag it with support group. That definitely goes a long ways and helps us get more people into the live stream so we can have a very interactive comment section where I can try and answer your questions, or you guys can answer each other's questions, or just share a little bit about what's going on in your life. And for those of you people who are here right now, feel free to say hello. Let me say, maybe shout you out where you're from. Let us know what's going on in your life. If you have somebody, a loved one with disabilities or special needs, let us know a little bit about what's going on. See if maybe we can help you or somebody else can help you who's watching today. Today, we are talking about a topic that's very, very close to my heart. We're gonna be talking about siblings. So oftentimes, we spend a lot of our time and energy focusing on the little ones in our life with autism, Down syndrome, or whatever the diagnosis condition may be. I know that having a loved one like a sibling or a child who has disabilities can be a very challenging task, as we all know, right? But the conversation that tends to maybe go, I'd say, not discussed enough is about your other children, the siblings in the family, right? Your other children who are neurotypical, who don't have special needs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about maybe my perspective. This might be a little bit more of a storytelling time today. I haven't done that in a long time, about my life and who I am and why I work here at Galt Advocacy, and who my family is. And that's going to relate very closely to what the topic is. And of course, if you have questions about other things, IHSS, Regional Center, IEP support, let us know. Please feel free to drop a comment either way. I'm happy to try and answer as many questions as I can. But we're going to be talking about, you know, again, the siblings perspective, some things that I've experienced as a sibling who has brothers and sisters who have special needs, and how my parents are planning on preparing for their future. You know, if they're no longer here to support them in those parental ways, those caregiving ways, how are us siblings in the family, how are the other family members going to have to plan and prepare for that, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some things that you can be thinking about or doing before that day does come one day, right? All right, we have Miss Sierra. Can we talk about preparing for your disabled child's future? Yes, absolutely. So we are going to talk about that today. And a little bit about things that you can do today, and then things you're going to kind of continue to do until maybe that one day does come, right? And so let us know. I'm also very interested to hear from people who are kind of veterans in the world of special needs. Maybe you have a child, an adult child with autism, Down syndrome, intellectual disability, and you've taken those steps. Maybe you've spent the last 20, 30 years sort of preparing for that. Let us know if you've done that yourself, if you have any advice for people about maybe trial and errors that you've gone through, things that you wished you knew before you started planning for some of these things. So yeah, I'm very curious to hear other people's perspectives and journeys as well. So let us know. Sierra, thank you so much for being here in the comment. You're welcome to ask anything specific to that if you have questions. I'm guessing maybe it's something you've already thought about, and maybe you already have a little bit of a plan in place. If not, that's okay. But I'm definitely curious to hear if you have anything set up. But real quick backstory, not backstory, but I guess, who I am in case you're not familiar. I know that a lot of people who come here every single week, you know who I am, you know who Nicole is, you know who Dakota is, and you've met some of the other team as well. And so for those who may not be very familiar with Galt Advocacy or myself, this is my family's agency. So my mom started Galt Advocacy, and she is the mother of 11 children. I am one of them. She gave birth to 7 and adopted 4. And so out of the 4 that she adopted, 3 of them have Down syndrome and autism, profound profound intellectual disabilities and mental impairments. And so I'm very familiar with the life of what it is to have somebody with special needs in your home. And so I'm really excited to talk a little bit about my experience and perspectives and give you some things and ideas that maybe you could start focusing on. Sierra, I have 0 things set up and I would like to know where to start. Well, I'm glad you're here today. I'm happy to give you some pointers on maybe just a few next steps that you can focus on. A lot of this, I will be giving you homework. So a lot of this will be things that you're going to have to take offline here and put into action. So I'm going to give you some of the blueprint, but it is going to be on you and your family to maybe take those next steps, because some of it's going to involve some, legal stuff, right? But nothing to be scared of. This is all going to be things that can be taken care of. And what's cool is you can design a plan for pretty much anybody. So I know a lot of people are, especially here in California, I know a lot of people are worried about that next step. What is going to happen? And here in California, we have some great options. So you can be prepared. You can plan for a great future here for your child, your loved one. So we're going to talk about that. But for me, again, I grew up in the world of special needs. I've been around it my entire life. I've grown up around the programs like Regional Center and IHSS and the IEP world. My siblings who have special needs have all had IEPs and have had many IEP meetings. And so I've heard all the gossip. I've heard all the tea from my mom and the support team who have had to spend years and years focusing on that world, right? But all my siblings now are adults. Every single one of my siblings. I have 10 siblings, and my youngest sibling, Sarah, who has worked at the office before. You might have run into her or talked with her on the phone. She usually has worked at reception and has helped out from time to time. But she is 21 this year, right? No. Did she turn 21 last year? I forget. She's in her 20s now. And so that means that all of my siblings are adults. She's the youngest. But my 3 siblings who have special needs, autism and Down syndrome, among other things, they're all in their 30s. And so my parents have had to put a lot of things in place. And they're not done. There's still things that they have to work on. But it is nice. I'm very blessed that there's a big support system here. And so there is a bit of like a weight off of our shoulders, knowing that my siblings with special needs, they're going to be taken care of. And so that is a big blessing that I get to have that maybe a lot of other people don't. And so I'm going to share more of a realistic scenario for those of you who don't have 10,000 children who can help out. I'm going to give you some ideas and some plans here. But if you do have siblings, we're going to talk about that. So excuse me. And so, sorry, the banner here should be planning for the future as well. So I know we're kind of going off a little bit. Isabel, you said my son with special needs is 7 years old, older than my daughter. My daughter right now is only 9. Okay, well, I'm glad that you're here, and we're going to just kind of jump into a couple things. I'm going to start with maybe some sibling perspective things and then transition to planning for the future, okay? So I want to give you kind of a realistic, I'd say a real realistic picture of what it is like in my brain, as well as I'd say a lot of siblings as well who I've connected with, I've talked to with my siblings as well, who are neurotypical and kind of their perspectives, and all the people that I've talked to over the many years of doing this. And Denise, I see you and Christina, you both have questions. I'll get to you in just a moment. Hang tight. I'm going to try and go back and forth to your questions and the topic today. But I will give you kind of, reality here. I get called from time to time where a parent or parents have set everything up for their child. Maybe their child's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and they've got IHSS. They've got their protective supervision. They've battled the school for many years, but their IEP is looking like where it needs to be. They've worked with Regional Center. They've got everything set up with Regional Center. But now all of a sudden, the sibling of this child is acting out. The sibling is, sort of needing to be cared for in a way, more so than they have before. And that tends to happen a lot. When you spend so many years really honing in and focusing on the care of your child with special needs, that, I think it goes without saying, sometimes the siblings can be left out in a lot of conversations and a lot of planning. And I know for me, I had a very unique upbringing. I had such a huge family that it wasn't really odd to be left out in a sense. And my parents, my mom, my dad, my step parents, all did a fabulous job raising all of us. I could not be more thankful for the life that I have lived. And so even with all of that support, my siblings and myself, we were sort of put second in a sense to the needs of my siblings who have special needs. And Ryan, my oldest brother, he passed away back in 2004 due to the disabilities that he had. And his whole life from age, 1 to 18, he passed away at the age of 18. His life was special needs everything. He was in and out of the hospital due to his severe, really complicated medical issues. And so my parents' life really revolved around my brother Ryan for many, many years. And then on top of that, they had kiddos with Down syndrome and autism in the home. So it was a very complex scenario for my parents, and they did a fabulous job. But regardless of how hard they did at raising all of us, we were going to be put second on a lot of things, right? And so I'm just going to be real. There is going to be probably some resentment from your other children who are neurotypical. And that may not be the case for you or your children, but I will tell you from my perspective, and then working with a lot of people who are in similar situations, there were points in my life as a young child where I didn't really care about the special needs, right? I didn't care that was a factor that had to be kind of, considered. If you were my sibling, you were my sibling, and we should all be treated equally. But that wasn't the case for my siblings with special needs. They were not treated equally. They were given a lot more support than I was, right? And as a child, you don't understand that, right? So I give young Caleb some grace, being selfish and not understanding. But once you hit that middle school, early high school age, it can be really tricky, because at that age, everything is about friends. Everything is about status. Everything is about, having the coolest shoes, the coolest clothes, going to all of the events that are happening at school with your friends and all that stuff. And unfortunately, there were a lot of things that I had to miss out on. And I couldn't really invite a whole lot of friends over. I had a couple of really close friends that sort of understood my family's dynamic, but it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to find people to come to the house and hang, because you don't know what your house is going to smell like that day, right? You don't know if your brother with profound autism was going to be having an episode where he wants to strip and fling his diaper across the house, right? Those were things that were hard to prepare for. And so because of that, I would say I was isolated a little bit from what was typical. But, aside from that, I would say I managed it very well. I had a great teenagehood. I was, relatively typical, played sports, had friends. And so I would say for a vast majority of other siblings and their perspectives is similar. They go through a bit of a period where they're very, very resentful. And then a lot of siblings move away. I know I did. I moved away. As soon as I turned 18, I moved out and I left the city. I was 2 hours away. And then eventually I had to work my way back because it's a part of my life and my heart. And that's why I work with Galt Advocacy today. So my perspective, I'd say, is maybe a little bit different, but I do wanted to briefly share that with you, that if you're struggling, if you have other children and they may not understand the situation as much as you do, obviously give them some grace. I think a very common thing that a lot of siblings of individuals with special needs all say is that they don't need to be told every single time there's a meltdown that they need to be patient with their sibling and that they need to love their sibling and that they're going to be their sibling's only best friend and that we're the only people in the world that are going to truly get. The siblings know that for the most part. Time and a place. I think it's great to remind your children of that. If you have little Timmy who's having a meltdown and it's really embarrassing and it's frustrating, and maybe your other child, Johnny, is trying to focus on their homework and it's distracting because little Timmy's having a meltdown and is requiring a lot of attention right now, it's okay to remind the siblings that this is just how our family is, right? But I think that a lot of parents tend to struggle with remembering the validation portion. It is hard being a sibling to somebody with special needs. It is hard. It's, I would say, maybe not as difficult as being a parent, of course, not taking any credit away from you, but it still has its own challenges. It has its own difficult factors to it. And so learning how to navigate that, I think, is another piece that it's hard to remember because you're so focused on everything else, but it's important. I would say join some support groups who talk about these issues, read some books about what it's like. and other people's perspectives. There are siblings perspective books out there that exist. I couldn't name you one, but I have done some research and see that they're out there, and I'd love to read some someday. But I would say get familiar with the validation portion, learning how to support your other children in ways where it can feel less of a burden to have a sibling with special needs. And hopefully that can maybe bring back some of the bad feelings that they might feel, like resentment towards a sibling or anything like that. I know I never had, hate for my siblings or anything like that. It was never that deep, but I did feel resentful. I did feel that it was unfair, that I had to kind of live in a life like this. Like, why can't my family be normal, right? I remember feeling that a lot growing up as a child and even as a teenager. But there's something really great, and I'm going to kind of end on this point with perspectives, and then we're going to go into a little bit of special needs planning. But I do remember pretty vividly being, in my early 20s, probably 10 years ago, just about. And I started noticing, now that I'm living on my own and I'm working and I'm in the real world away from my family, I started to notice that I had more patience than the average person. I noticed that I maybe viewed things a little bit differently, and my emotional intelligence I felt was maybe a little bit higher than my average peers. And I always just kind of wondered, why some of these things were. And that was when it just kind of hit me, where, my life and who I am was shaped because of the way that I grew up. And when I talk to any sibling who has a sibling with special needs, any person who has a sibling with special needs, we all sort of have this weird realization when we go into the real world. We're different than the average person. We're very, very different. We see things differently. We view people differently. It's just kind of it's an interesting perspective, I think. But it's what makes it interesting, I mean, is the fact that it seems to be pretty unison. A lot of us tend to feel this way, where we feel like, why am I the most patient person in the room? Why do I feel overwhelmed by everybody else's anger and impatience, right? When my wife or my in-laws who've never been around special needs, they bicker or gripe, or they get upset about maybe something very, very small, that bothers me, because again, I had a sibling who would fling his diaper in the middle of Walmart if he had a meltdown, right? I had to learn how to cope with that. And a lot of you have to cope with that as parents. And a lot of your children who don't have special needs have to cope with those things, right? And so I think it's really cool that I get to look back now on memories like that. I don't sit there and feel negative feelings to those meltdowns or those moments where I might have been embarrassed back then, because now I get reminded as to why I love my siblings so much. I love them because of their special needs in a lot of ways, right? And so, not to be super mushy-gushy, I can go on and on about this, but I think it is really important to shift some focus on the siblings as much as you can, and get creative with it. If you ever want advice or thoughts, I'm all ears. I'm always happy to chat with any of you if you have questions on that. But with that perspective, let's shift to probably a more important conversation, which is going to be the actual planning for the future. Maybe one of these siblings has to care for your child in the future if you're not going to be able to, right? So we're going to talk about maybe some steps you could take. So I'll come to the questions, your comments real quick, and then we'll jump into that. Isabel, we talked about that. Denise, my son is 38 years old. I set up his future when he was 18 with where he will be once I'm gone. Unfortunately, I've learned over the years that you will have to have a plan B, C, and D. That's true. That is very, very true. Let us know if you have any specifics as to what you've done and put in place, and maybe what some of those plans are. I'd be very curious. Christina, I just did conservatorship and added my daughter to take over if anything happens. Beautiful. We're going to talk about that too. Hi, Anna. Oh, Christina. Sorry, I got mixed up on the comments there. Christina and Annie, I'll leave you two alone. There you go. Hi, Sarah. Welcome. Denise, I'm also a sibling of 2 disabled sisters. Both are gone now, so I understand both. Awesome. I'm so glad that you're here, Denise. And if you have any friends or people in your life that are in that situation with like you and me, I'd love to connect. Jocelyn, definitely hard for siblings, especially when they're younger and don't fully understand. So it's important to start to guide and educate them early on. Absolutely, 100%. And so I think you guys get it. Again, it's not rocket science. I think it's a pretty simple statement. Don't forget to give some focus on the other siblings as well, right? If you've got all 4 or 5, 2, 3, 4, 5 children, you're gonna love them all equally, of course, right? But sometimes kids do need to be reminded of that in certain ways. And it's not just words. It's not just, I love you equally, right? It will come in different forms. Validation is one of them, right? It's sometimes it's really hard to remember that when little Johnny is focusing on his homework or hanging out with a friend, but then little Timmy, your child with autism, is having a meltdown, and seeing little Johnny get upset and frustrated and not having the patience for Timmy, or I forget the names, but either way, sometimes it's easy to get angry with your child in that moment and say, look, you guys, you need to chill out. He's going to have a meltdown. That's just a part of who he is right now, right? Be patient. He's your brother. He's your sister. You got to love them. And again, time and a place. But it's also really important to recognize and say, you know what? You're right. This is embarrassing. I'm really sorry that he had a meltdown in front of your friend. I'm really sorry that he's upset because of XYZ reason. And it is really, really hard. I really appreciate you being patient with him right now. You're allowed to feel however you want to feel. If you feel upset and embarrassed right now, I'm going to give you some room and some grace for that. I totally get it, right? Sometimes that goes a long ways, further than just reminding them that they need to love their sibling, right? I never didn't love my siblings, right? But there were plenty of times where I could not be in the house with them because I was upset. I was frustrated with the meltdown, right? Or whatever the situation may be. And so just a reminder, Jocelyn, thanks for being here and understanding. So back to Miss Sierra. I have done 0 things and I would like to know where to start. I'm going to give you some pointers, okay? So if you live here in California, you're very, very blessed because we have a lot of things here that maybe other states don't. I can't talk on other states because I'm not familiar with the regulations and services that they have set up, but I can talk briefly about what we can do here in California. So if you live in California, you have access to Regional Center. I'm going to start there. I know a lot of you know what Regional Center is, but a lot of people don't know maybe some of the really important things of Regional Center, why Regional Center really exists. Regional Center exists not just for respite or personal assistance services or free diapers. Regional Center can act as sort of like a conservator or guardian in a way. God forbid something were to happen to you, right? So if you have a child who is a client of the Regional Center, and if you were no longer available to be their caregiver anymore, whether they're a child or an adult, automatically Regional Center gets to be kind of like their guardian in a sense. If you don't have a backup plan, if you don't have a plan in place, then your child will be in the care of Regional Center. Now, what does that look like? Well, when your child gets approved, they will go through a series of assessments. You'll get something like an IPP, right? That's the document you get from Regional Center that talks about who your child is and what their limitations are. But excuse me, oh my gosh. But they will also have kind of behind the scenes, they're going to have some information about what kind of home this child would have to be in if they couldn't be in your home. If they had to be placed in care out of home, what would that look like? And so they have things that they will approve this child for or this adult for and never really tell you about it unless you talk with your caseworker about it. And so, for example, my brother, his name is Steven. He has profound autism. He's in his 30s, still in diapers, nonverbal, and he requires round-the-clock supervision. So if he were to be cared for by somebody else besides my parents, he would have to be placed in a very specific facility or group home that Regional Center pays for, basically, right? Helps cover, I'll say, rather. And so if you don't tell Regional Center or design that plan with them, they will design it for you, okay? And the best thing you can do is to make sure you get ahead of that so that your little Johnny does not end up in a group home or a place where maybe it's not the best fit for him, right? You can get ahead of that. You can talk with your caseworker and say, hey, what is the process here? God forbid something were to happen. Can you tell me how you would support my child and what kind of out-of-home placement he would be approved for, he or she? And Regional Center can have that discussion with you, okay? So Regional Center is one of the pillars here. There's a few pillars we're going to look at. So Regional Center is one of them. The next pillar is going to be estate planning. So we've talked a lot about that with Ellen Cookman, who's joined us a couple times. She joined us recently, actually. But if you are looking to design a formal backup plan for the future, where maybe it's one of your other children are going to care for your loved one with special needs, or maybe you don't want them to have that that responsibility, you want it to be somebody else. It is best to connect with an estate planning attorney, a family law lawyer, estate planning attorney who can help you design something really great. Okay. And so we do have some referrals and references if you need to speak with somebody. However, you can research any estate planning or family law lawyer in your area and meet with them locally, and they should be able to care for you. They should be able to help you out. Certain things you're going to have to put in place are going to be things like a special needs trust, a will. Those are some very simple things that you are going to have to put in place. Okay, and if you don't, it will be a little bit more of a challenge to make sure they're set up financially. Okay. The other thing too, when working with an estate planner or a family law lawyer, is possibly a financial advisor or a financial firm who also specializes in insurance, life insurance. Having a special needs trust, having a CalAble account, having a will, having all these things in place is great. But if you don't have a financial advisor to help you direct where these funds are going to go into these umbrellas, these are all little upside down umbrellas, right? These buckets, and money is going to be put into these buckets however you design it, right? It is a really great, smart thing to do to probably connect with a financial advisor and talk about things like life insurance and other things to help you fill those buckets if something were to ever happen, right? And so these are all, again, kind of some simple things. Gina, you said it sounds so expensive. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. This stuff can be very expensive, unfortunately. But I would say it's more important than it is expensive, but that's subjective, right? So I would say it's something you probably have to budget for, but that's why you start now. That's why you connect with these agencies or these firms or these people and talk to them about what this will look like in the future when it comes time to put these things in place, right? And earlier the better. The sooner you can do it. You can't do it too early. I'll say that, right? Isabel, you said, what is a CalAble account? So a CalAble account is an account that you can have for somebody, like a savings account for somebody with special needs. So there are some rules around it, but most family law lawyers, estate planners, or financial advisors can look this up for you and kind of explain if it's something that's a good fit. Excuse me, but to my understanding, you have to be diagnosed with a mental impairment before the age of 26. And so if you were born with autism or born with Down syndrome or something like that, then you should be able to get a CalAble account. So a CalAble account basically allows this person to continue having a savings in their own name without being penalized on the social service front, right? So if they have Medi-Cal, they have IHSS, they have SSI and things like that, these are all things that are determined by your income for the most part, especially as an adult, right? And so you can't have an account in this person's name and then start stacking all the SSI checks that come in for them. Because if you end up having $20,000 because you've been claiming SSI for 10 years, Medi-Cal will see that, SSI will see that, and they'll stop. They'll stop with those funds, right? So you can have things like a CalAble account that can help with preventing those complications in the future. So I would recommend researching CalAble accounts, see if it's something that you think you could benefit from, or your child or your loved one can benefit from, see if it's a good fit. I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't tell you to go open one, but there's options that are like that are available that I would highly recommend you do some research on. Karina, hello. What age do you have that conversation with the siblings about their brother or sister having a disability and explaining that to them? That's a really tough one. How do you prepare the sibling for taking over? Sorry, Teresa, I saw your comment here. We're getting into that. We talked a little bit about that a minute ago, but we're talking about that now more formally. So I'm going to say it's going to be family to family, sibling to sibling, right? Child to child, parent to child. Ugh, excuse me. You know, I don't think my parents ever really had that conversation with me personally until I was an adult, but that's just because I was one of the youngest out of the huge tribe of siblings. I have two incredible adult sisters who are 13 and 15 years older than I am. And they were a huge part of making my childhood so wonderful. I love my mom dearly, but there were many, many times where she was not the one tucking me or my young siblings into bed. It was going to be my older siblings. It was going to be Melissa or Christina. And a lot of you maybe have met Christina or talked with Christina. She is an advocate here with Galt Advocacy. But Christina is 15 years older than I am. And so she played a very intricate part in raising me as a child. And she was a big help to my mom. Because my mom was, again, really focused on Ryan and his special needs, and Steven and my sisters Molly and Emily, who all have Down syndrome and autism. And so they stepped up a lot. So they had those conversations pretty early on. because they knew that they already were playing a pretty active role in all of the siblings' lives because they were so much older than the rest of us. And so for you, Karina, I would say this is going to be entirely up to you and when you feel like your child is ready. I think that putting too much pressure on them too soon might be not the best strategy, but you can still keep it kind of a reality and have that conversation with them organically in a sense where I think it's going to depend on the relationship, right? So if you see that you have a child who is head over heels for their sibling with autism or Down syndrome, whatever it is, and you feel comfortable, you know what, I think even though little Timmy is, 13, 14, 15, I still think they're too young to maybe grasp the concept of future care, but maybe I can start, putting the seed in there, right? Maybe putting some seeds in there, asking them questions about what they would want, how their sibling to be cared for, how they would want their sibling to be cared for when they're an adult, right? And so maybe not having it like a super formal conversation with them about it, but making it kind of an organic, fun conversation to plan for their future. And so I wish I had a better answer for you, Karina, but I just don't. I think it's going to be more individualized. I think it's going to be family to family. But if you ever wanted to reach out and ask me and share with me a little bit about your situation, I'm more than happy to maybe provide some more specific details for you. Isabel, you said, thank you. I've never heard of this. Yeah, so I think you were referring to the Calable account, right? Yeah, you asked what the Calable account was. Yeah, it's a great option. It's a great option and it works for some. I would highly recommend researching that among other things as well in the financial world for people with special needs. So the question, how do you prepare the sibling for taking over the role of the parent when mom and dad can't do it anymore? So I'll leave your comment up, Teresa. Thank you. Obviously having the conversation, which is going to be a hard one, right? That's not an easy conversation to have. But I would say one of those things too that was mentioned earlier was conservatorships and things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about maybe how you can plan in that way. So when you are in the estate planning world, working with an attorney, financial advisor, and whatever, there is a conversation that's going to pop up about conservatorships, powers of attorney, things like that. And so when your child becomes an adult here in California, if they cannot make medical decisions, financial decisions, relationship decisions, if they cannot live independently or support themselves, economic self-sufficiency, then it might be a good idea to have a power of attorney or a conservatorship. So these two things allow you as the parent to sort of be in control in a sense, right? So a lot of us who hear conservatorship, we think Britney Spears locked in a basement. That's not what we're talking about, okay? If you are a client of the regional center, you can get something called a limited conservatorship, which allows you as a parent, once they turn 17 years old, once they turn 17, that's when you could start planning for this. And then at age 18, they could have a conservatorship, which allows you to take certain powers from them so that you can, if you know that they can't make those medical decisions, financial decisions, or relationship decisions on their own, you can make them for them legally. So a lot of people will have their child turn 18 and then they don't get anything formalized like this. And then they start talking to the doctors for them. They start making financial decisions for them. And technically, you're not allowed to do that. You can, of course, you can help them, but in the eyes of the state, they're not going to recognize you as mom and child anymore, or dad as child. Because once your child turns 18, you're no longer the parent to them in the eyes of California. You're now just their caregiver. You're just somebody who helps this individual, this adult individual. So if you get something like a power of attorney or a conservatorship, it allows the state to recognize that you're not just their guardian, you're also their payee on the power of attorney, or their conservator, the person who has a say about where they live, what they do, who they talk to. So for my sibling, that's very, very important. So all three of my siblings with Down syndrome, they're all conserved. They cannot live on their own. They cannot, make decisions for themselves that are really important to their lives. And so because of that, every time they have to go to the doctor, their conservators, my mom, my dad, they have to step in and make those medical decisions for them. Because if that wasn't there, then they would have to trust my siblings with special needs to make those decisions. And that's just not possible, right? There's also a lot of really dark reasons why considering a conservatorship is important. I'm not going to maybe go over that in detail today, but I would highly recommend that if you have a child who's getting close to adulthood age, you should start talking to an attorney or a paralegal or somebody, a family law their family therapist about conservatorships, power of attorneys. What would be a better fit for you, or for your child rather? All right, so I don't think I missed any comments. So to kind of go over this question again a little bit more. So so once you get something like a power of attorney or a conservatorship, you can sort of make it to where the siblings or the loved ones in your family could also be like those backups. Somebody else said that earlier. I think it was... So Christina said that she has a conservatorship and she added her daughter to take over if anything happens. That is phenomenal. That's a great recommendation that I would absolutely relay over to you. So if you think that that is a reality, if you think that one of the siblings is going to have to take over in the care, then once you get to the conversation of conservatorship or power of attorney, you can work with an estate planning lawyer or somebody who can work with you on having that as a part of the backup plan, where if something were to happen to the main conservators, the siblings can be the next conservator in place. And if you're not in California, I'm guessing pretty much everybody here is from California. Outside of California, it may not be considered a conservatorship. It may be a guardianship or something like that. So if you ever leave the state, it still exists in other states, this legal document that makes you the decision maker for this person's life. It just may not be called a conservatorship. But here in California, it's called a conservatorship. So the difference is, really briefly, about power of attorney and conservatorship. Power of attorney is something that allows you to help the person make decisions, whereas a conservatorship or a limited conservatorship allows you to make the decisions for the person. That's really one big difference there, to kind of just simply put it. But as a part of what you need to do, if you're going to be planning on having a sibling take over one of your other children, is to make sure that they're listed as one of those co-conservators, or co-payees, or whatever that's called for power of attorney. Tanya, my sister and I placed in the conservatorship that my son will go to a care home and not live with any of his cousins. You can go on vacation to visit the home for the holidays. We made the decision to protect their future relationships and future children. I love that you shared this, Tanya. I really appreciate you opened up and shared what you've done personally, because this is actually a really awesome option. So you do not have to feel... Sorry, I gotta think of how I want to say this. Just because you are a family member, a sibling, a loved one of this child or adult with special needs, does not mean that you have to care for them. You don't. Thankfully, in California, we have options. We have out-of-home placements. So that is also a conversation you can have with your sibling, with your other children, and it's to say, like, you are not gonna have to be responsible for them, okay? But if you are, great, that makes things a lot easier. But if in some situations, that's just not the case for some people. And so that is when you're going to have to really leverage the regional center. You're going to have to really leverage your estate planning attorneys to help you create that backup plan. A will is very important. The will is what's going to do exactly this, right? Make sure that they're in a home. Now, fun conversation. I've talked about this before. What about the type of facility, the home, whatever? In California, at times, there are home loan programs. I don't know if there's a home loan program right now. I'm not a loan officer, so I can't talk on it specifically too much. But I do know that in the past, there have been home loan programs so that you can buy a home in your child's name, in a sense, where the benefits act kind of like a VA, where you get like low PMI, you have a lower interest rate, and you don't have to put as much down. Normally, you have to put 20% down if it's not an FHA, which is the first-time home buyer, right? So if you already own a home, you've already done the first-time home buyer, but you have a child with special needs, you can then buy another home in their name, excuse me, with some of these benefits, and that could be the dedicated home. That could be the dedicated facility or group home that they might have to go to. So again, that is not something that I can break down for you or do for you, because that's not what I specialize in, but you can talk to a realtor. We do have somebody who actually has done some of this in the past. I'm more than happy to share their information with you guys. Home loan officers, people who specialize in the actual loans themselves, I'd say get connected with them and see what is available right now, because it does change. Just because there's a home loan program that existed 5 years ago doesn't mean it exists today, but I do know that there have been several that have kind of come in and out that have been available. So something to maybe be on the lookout for, so that something like this could be a possibility, but still a home rather than like a facility, if you will. But great share, Tanya. I'm really glad that you shared that. I'm gonna see if there's any actual other questions here. I would say too, once your children get to a certain age, that if they are going to be caring for this loved one, make sure they're well versed on the regional center conversation. I would educate them on, what regional center is and how they play a role and how they've had to help you with a lot of stuff as a parent. And teach them how to leverage regional center, talk to the caseworker, and it kind of explain that it's a nonprofit here in California that is there for this person for the rest of their life, right? So I would say teaching them some of the ins and outs of regional center, and again, IHSS, if they have IHSS, how their SSI payments work every month, right? These would be things that I would definitely have conversations with your sibling, with the other children about. Teresa shared Shauna Guzman can answer questions about home loan information. Thank you, Teresa. So Shauna Guzman is a friend of Galt Advocacy. She's phenomenal. She is in that home loan world. So if you are interested in maybe purchasing a home and you want to talk to her about how you can do that living on IHSS income, and possibly buy the home in the child's name, she's the one that's going to have all that information. So she's phenomenal. So go ahead and reach out to her if you can. Thank you, Teresa. I didn't know you had her information. Sweet. Okay, I know I went a little while without answering a question, so I just want to make sure. If you have a question, please drop a comment below. I'm happy to try and address it. I know we do have a few more minutes left. So that conversation, oh, here we go. Janice, what if they're already 21 and don't have one? So it's never too late. You don't have to get a conservatorship or do any of these things in the backup estate planning world. At age 18, you can do it at 21 as well. So at age 21, still a great time. You can connect with an estate planning lawyer, family law lawyer, financial advisor. You can still connect with all these people. Sorry, hopefully I didn't scuff up too much noise. But yeah, if Janice, if your child's are already 21 or your sibling, I don't know who you're talking about, I'd say now is a great time to start having those conversations with the other children or family members who you might want to care for this person. Talk with the estate planning people, the backup plan people, regional center. And again, I think it would be really important to educate them on the things that you already know, right? Because we know how difficult it can be to manage something like an IHSS recipient, like their IHSS benefit or their SSI benefits. So, I mean, having all of that listed out and planned for ahead of time, knowing that, okay, if little Timmy has to go to my other daughter, Laura, when he's 18, or, if I pass away, I want them to have access to all this information. So if you have a conservatorship over this person, and then you have, Laura, the sister, as a co-conservator, and they have to do that when they're an adult, then the transition will be much easier, much easier. And so a lot less complicated, I'll say, rather than easier, because it's not easy. It's never going to be easy, but less complicated if they're already a co-conservator or a second PE or whatever it's called for the power of attorney. But yeah, just because they're 21, Janice, that means you could start on it now because they're over 18. I would if I were you. Great questions. You guys are awesome. I'm so glad that you're all here. Again, just combing through to see if I missed anybody. We don't have a ton of comments today. I talked to you on TikTok about this. If you remember, I went live with you, my first one ever. Nice. Yes. Cool. Well, I'm glad you're here. All right. So trying to think of any other things that you can do. I think that something I keep coming back to is that conversation with your siblings. That's going to be really difficult. Oh, Brittany's here, everybody. Jump in a little late. Can we change it at any time if we change our plan? Yeah, of course. So absolutely. If you have a backup plan in place, you have a will, trusts, all of these things, you can adjust them however you want. So that's why I would recommend having a good relationship with the people who help you design these plans, right? So just because something is, again, put into agreement now doesn't mean it can't be changed in the future. Definitely. Anna, can regional center make decisions for the client if you don't have conservatorship at the age of 18? So if you are the one caring for them, then you can be informally considered a guardian without actually having a guardianship, conservatorship, or power of attorney, technically. So if you are the primary caregiver for this person, then no, regional center is not going to be stepping in and making a bunch of decisions for them. However, in the past, to my understanding, this is not a thing anymore, but in the past, regional center used to conserve people. I don't know exactly how true that is, but to my understanding, it was a big deal and they stopped doing that. To my understanding, that only happened when they were held responsible for that person's out-of-home placement. So when that person could no longer be cared for by family and they were given to the regional center would then be their conservator. And then that regional center would make all the decisions for them. However, I don't believe that's how it works anymore. So if they have nobody, if there is nobody in the backup plan, there's no family, there's no friends, there's nobody that can care for this person or help regional center care for them, then regional center will have to make some decisions for them, of course, right? They will have to determine this person's cognitive deficit limitations and figure out where they land so that if they need help long-term, what types of decisions are they going to need help with? And regional center would have the power to do some of those things. All right. Trying to think. Also, if you have GALT advocacy or an advocacy representative or somebody that you work with, I would highly recommend that those things are also included in your backup plan, like your will. So a lot of people who work with us, for example, we have a lot of great long-term partnerships with a lot of the families that we work with. But a big question we get asked a lot is, hey, you know, I'm having you help me get IHSS and helping me with school and helping with regional center. But what happens if I'm no longer here? You know, who are you still going to be the advocate or the support team for my child? And the answer is yes, because they are our client, right? Your little Timmy that you want us to help get protective supervision for, they are our client. So it's important to make sure that whoever the caregiver might be in the future, they're aware of who we are, or they're aware of whatever support system you have in place. And so that's a part of the backup plan or the will that you're going to have. You can include all of these types of things because it would be really important if you have lawyers, advocates, representatives, people that are a part of the support team, not be lost if you are unable to care for this child anymore. So something to consider as well. Amanda, my husband and I are starting to get a conservatorship for our 20-year-old son. The people set up to get him if we die in Texas. Should we add them as a backup people for a conservatorship? I'm going to tell you to probably bring that back up to the person that's helping you get the conservatorship. So again, in Texas, I could be wrong, but I think Texas, they call it a guardianship. And so it's not transferable to the next state. So if you get a guardianship or a conservatorship in another state and then you move to California, I know that a lot of people have to sort of kind of like reapply for it in a sense. They have to like, not reapply, but get it kind of like reinstated, but in California. So how that would work with caregivers in Texas, I'm not too sure. But I do think that would be you could still do that. You could still say, hey, I want our friends or our family in Texas to have little Timmy if something were to happen. You could absolutely have that as a part of the plan. But as far as how services and things would be transferred into to Texas, that's the tricky part. That's the part that a lawyer or an estate planning attorney would have to help you with on the logistics of it, I would say. All right, everybody, we're just about out of time. How'd we do? Hopefully there's some helpful information. I know a lot of it, especially in the beginning, was just me talking about my life. But I hope that some of this could be helpful. I know I probably missed a lot of things. Teresa is going to get on me. She's going to send me an email and tell me I forgot to add this, that, and this. So I'm sorry, Teresa. Hopefully I covered a good little chunk today. This is a big conversation, a big topic that we can go on and on about. I wish I was an estate planning attorney. I wish I was somebody who can design a backup plan for somebody, but I'm not. I can only just direct you and help you. Isabel, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. Hopefully it was helpful in some ways. And if you ever wanted to connect with us and ask questions of Myra Galt, she's the founder here. She's been in the world of special needs for a long, long time. So if you ever wanted to connect with her, pick her brain about that long-term planning, she's done it, right? She has experience in that. And I wouldn't be afraid to connect with other support groups, right? We know that there's a lot of support groups here on Facebook. Bring this topic to people who have been there, right? There might be siblings who are currently caring for their their special needs sibling where they were in that situation and now they're living it. Now they're the ones caring for their sibling, right? I know firsthand a couple of experiences that went that became really messy because the parents didn't put a plan in place the way that they needed to. And so to avoid that, get as much information as you can. I would highly recommend joining some support groups, dropping comments in open forums, asking questions about what other people have done, getting other people's advice. My advice is very minimal just in this little live stream. There's going to be lots and lots of hours of research you're going to have to do. And that's why I am going to recommend you do some homework here. Connect with an estate planning attorney, connect with a financial advisor, look at life insurance, look at all of these different avenues, regional center, talk with your caseworker about the backup planning. And again, what would happen, right? And what you can do to maximize the backup plan now. What can you do today so that they can be prepared for that in the future, right? All of those things. Thank you, Teresa. I know you're just supposed to say that today, but I appreciate it. Michelle, off topic, should I call SSI about my adult son's benefits? I know we are eventually, you guys will be getting PS for him. Oh, great. Okay, so should you call SSI about my adult son's benefits? Well, it kind of depends. SSI does have to know about like what services they have. That's a part of the process. So if you have like new stuff that you haven't told SSI about, I would just wait until like the annual renewal comes around. A lot of times it does. Or a lot of times you get like you get contacted by SSI where they have to update things. But if there's some big benefits or big changes that have occurred, it might be best to reach out to SSI. You most certainly can. It won't hurt. All right, everybody, I'm going to clock out. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you so much for being a part of this stream and hearing a little bit about my life and my perspective as a sibling who has individuals with special needs in my home growing up, and listening to some of the tips and things that I think you should probably focus on when it comes to long-term planning and having siblings take over or other loved ones take over or having regional center in the state take over. Again, these are all options. None is better or worse than others. It just comes down to you and your family dynamic. So feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Myra or our team anytime if you have questions. Call our office. Look us up online. You can see our information. You can send us an email as well. But with that said, I really appreciate all of your phenomenal questions, and those of you who are here every single week, I really appreciate you. Please take a moment to share the stream if you can. Tag a support group, tag a friend who might benefit from this information. That does go a long way. It's just that little step in your effort on your end, and we appreciate that. And I know a lot of people who are looking for information will appreciate that as well. But with that said, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful and safe Friday and weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.